Time's up. Admiral.
Here it comes.
Chevron 1, coded.
For my ally is the Force, and the powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow.
You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Cry havoc, and let's set the dogs of war.
Chevron 2 is coded.
Conan, what is best in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, to hear the lamentation of your women.
It's all in the reflexes.
I'll also say that you're heavy into martial arts, Tai Chi and all that killer stuff.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
Chevron 3 encoded.
And somebody ought to belt you in the mouth. But I won't. I won't. The hell I will.
Chevron 4 encoded.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Chevron 5 encoded.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Chevron 6 encoded.
Not for while you can, monk boy.
Great Scott.
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
You shall not pass!
I thought I'd die fighting side by side with an elf.
What about side by side with a friend?
A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day.
Chevron 7 is locked.
Hail and howdy, everybody. Welcome back to another Saturday Night Drive-In, where I admit I totally zoned out there for a second. I realized I'm hearing the end of the opener go, and I realized, hey, idiot, stop staring off into the distance. It's you got to pay attention. It's like, huh? What? Oh shit! Yes, I so completely zoned out. Oh, we hope everybody's having a good weekend so far. I know I am. Oh, thank you, Disney. Thank you, Disney, for being shit. Jed, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm excited for this stream because this might be one of the few times where we are in near complete agreement. I haven't heard your score yet for this film, but my bet is that we're going to be the same number, or at least 0.5.
Around there. With I think within a number. Within
I'm
one.
pretty confident in that.
Yeah, because today's game, War Games, it's a movie that has stood the test of time in terms of its commentary. Even though the technology, it's so weird watching 1983 tech. I was barely alive, but I was there. Not that old. But anyway, so yeah, we're gonna talk that. Do the best we can, because Jed, I streamed for almost 6 hours last night.
Ooh.
It was long time. 2 streams in a row. Donut eating contests. Beardo eating very, very dangerous hot sauce that we're gonna make Dermy eat next week. And but it was a good time. And Dermy lost to a woman in an eating contest again.
Really? Which woman? Gal?
Nomi. He lost again.
I mean, I get losing to a Marine. All right. If he lost to Gal, there's at least some redeeming qualities. But Nomi? That's like losing to Krista.
He made so many tactical errors going in. He fasted for 2 days before doing it, so he shrank his stomach.
Yeah, that was a bad idea. And was it a speed competition?
No,
like
total.
In a certain amount of time.
Total. No. Just how many? It was a donut eating contest, but all they could find that they could both get were Hostess donuts. Those tiny little horrible, like
the white powder ones.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So they bought a bunch of bags each, and it was who could eat so many. It was a marathon, not a race.
Okay.
And
if it were a race, that would be different. Krista would destroy everyone in a marathon. When I used to live at the G&G Content House, she would eat more than 10 of us. It was, she could pack it away. She was very impressive. Yeah,
I'm not going to make a
Jeremy's-
joke because I don't want to get hurt. But yeah, I mean, and Jeremy took it. He's sitting there. I'm eating my donuts, and Nomi's carefully eating it. And I mean, I was brought on purely for color commentary to troll Jeremy, which I did. I did my damnedest, but it was hysterical. And then at one point, he was at vomit point because he couldn't eat another one, and she beat him by like 7 or 8 donuts. And it was glorious. It's up there. Bald Busters. Go watch it, everybody, if you haven't. Anyway, but we're not here to make fun of Jeremy, even though it is a good time for all of us. We are here to talk 1983's War Games, starring Matthew Broderick, Ali Sheedy, and Dabney Coleman, and a bunch of other people whose names I don't really remember. So hail and howdy to the chat. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's get to go. All right, this was Jed's choice this week. Jed, why did you choose this one this week? Why did you choose War Games?
Well, there wasn't a whole lot of reasoning behind it. It's been on my list for a long time because I loved this movie. I saw it once, like probably 10 years ago, and even at that age, I recognized how great it was. A film, spoiler alert for the end, that can make a game of tic-tac-toe feel epic is just an impressive film, in my opinion. So I definitely wanted to check it out, especially after talking with Adam, how much he loves it, especially on the more Cold War aspect, the mad aspect of things that he enjoys. I thought this would be a great one to discuss that we probably share very similar opinions on. So I just felt like doing a nice, easy one, not as heavy as Lawrence of Arabia. Lawrence of Arabia was incredible, but that was a meaty discussion.
Yeah.
This one, not going to be so meaty, not going to be quite as
straightforward.
Yeah. It's
It
still a
had
good
been-
discussion, but not. It's kind of middle ground. It's just fun, lighthearted.
Yeah, it's an easy movie to talk about. It honestly, it had been 30 years since I've seen this movie.
Wow.
It had been longer than you've been alive since I'd last seen this movie. I mean, here's the thing: it was on 80s happens, and cable television happens, and suddenly you have all these premium channels, and you have all these broadcast mid-broadcast channels like TNT, TBS, all that kind of stuff. And this was a movie when cable became a thing that they would air constantly. So I didn't see this in the theaters. I only saw it on television. And I can honestly say I probably never watched it from the very beginning my entire life until this week, because it was something I watched a lot between the ages of, I would say, 5 and 10. And then it stops airing on television. And then it was never something I really saw much of again because I'd seen it a bunch. I kind of knew just about every scene. The beginning of the movie was the most foreign to me because I'd never really watched the beginning. But it's basically from
It's a great prologue, isn't it?
Oh, and I have a good story for you about the prologue. I've sort of told it before, but I can actually tell it now since it's the first time that this particular actor, we're actually having him in one of our movies. And he's going to appear in other movies again. Like when we see The Rock and stuff like that, this particular actor will appear again. But I usually always watch the movie from about end of first act on when he hacks into Joshua for the first time. And so that's usually when I always picked it up. But I never really see the beginning. So it was kind of interesting to watch it from beginning to end. And honestly, my favorite part of the movie is the end. That's the best part of the movie. The confrontation in the war room in Cheyenne Mountain Complex, where we know that about 28 levels below, the Stargate is being kept. So just everybody knows that.
Really?
Yeah. Well, in Stargate lore,
right.
Stargate Command is under NORAD. So it's a great cover story for Stargate Command. Anyway, so
now, just a side thing about NORAD real fast. It doesn't have anything to do with the movie, but I've met people, at least through my teenage years, who believe NORAD wasn't real, just like Area 51.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
It's like, yeah, there's this thing about NORAD just casually mentioning it, and there's like, yeah, NORAD? What, you're going to tell me you found some aliens there too? This Area 51 crap. It's like, I'm pretty sure NORAD was real.
Yeah, it's kind of like during the Cold War, it was our central command for all the nuclear
They did keep
arms.
its location secret for a while, though, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously you don't want the Russians to know where it's at to target.
It wasn't until Stargate SG-1 that I think everybody knew it was Cheyenne Mountain Complex. That became kind of the meme that here's NORAD and underneath NORAD is Stargate Command. So, because in the original Stargate movie, the Stargate wasn't at Cheyenne Mountain Complex. But then when they started SG-1, they moved it there. So I don't think it was really public knowledge until I would say the mid to late 90s.
Yeah.
That's about when I think. So once again, hail howdy to the chat, everybody. And now here's a fun story. Here's fun. So the beginning of the movie is frankly very interesting to me because it asks the question that we're still asking today. Do you trust human thought and human decision making, or do you trust a computer? And real quick, because I see it over on Jed's channel, 10
Hell
gifted
yeah.
subs from Dom H. Thank you, Dom H.
Thank you, sir.
Now, so this is very interesting. Played by a very good actor. One John Spencer is the captain in charge. I knew him.
Yeah.
I knew John Spencer. He was one of my mom's hair clients for 30 years when I was a kid. She did his hair when he would do stuff in New York, and he would come to New York to get his hair done with her. And when from there, and then he followed her around as we moved around the tri-state area for the first third of my life. And so I knew him. He's the guy who'd bring other people around when there were when he would come to visit my mom for a haircut.
Mhm.
Like, he's the dude who brought along the voice actor who did voice work for the original Thundercats. So for like kid me, it was like, oh my God, it's crazy. He's also the guy when I was 14. I had just gotten over pneumonia, and I'm sitting. School semester had started, but I hadn't gone back to school. So I'm sitting in the kitchen. I'm on my feet for the first time in like 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm sitting in the kitchen eating old Chinese food. He had come to get a haircut, and he's sitting there. He says, "Adam, I want to tell you a story." I go, "What?" "Okay, sure." He said, "All right, so no one knows about this yet." And now this is true because it was at least 6 months to a year before it became the urban legend about Richard Gere with the gerbil up his ass. So I heard about the Richard Gere gerbil ass meme before it became a thing. That's how I know. That's how we know it's real, because I heard about it from somebody before it became the urban legend meme.
Mm-hmm. Who did he play in War Games?
He's the captain who didn't want to turn the key.
Okay.
And I mean, he also had a career. He was at LA Law in the 80s, and he's had one of his last roles. He was on The Rock with Sean Connery and Nick Cage. He was the I think it was FBI, or maybe it was National. I forget.
Well, he gave a great performance in this film. I love the prologue. It's so sad that you've never really seen the prologue until this point, because it does set up a lot in this movie. Like, this movie is so predictive on a lot of trends in Hollywood and just pop culture in general, and just things in our society. Like, at least when it comes to technology, it deals with, of course, artificial intelligence. We got MAD, we got nuclear winter concepts, hacking. They mentioned computer games are going to be a big thing. At that point in 83, computer games weren't really anything to speak of yet, but they were able to predict all this stuff. So it's very fascinating how much that they were able to dial into the future zeitgeist, because I think this film probably ages very well. Of course, the Cold War tension of the era might make it a little bit more applicable than it is now, but otherwise I think it is just as applicable today as it is then, even though I'm not familiar with the technology to the point that someone of the era would be. I've never seen any equipment like that. Like, I never learned basic as a coding language like he uses, but
I remember the phones being plugged into
I've never used dial-up.
Oh God. I'd seen them, but by the time I was seeing more modern modems in my stepdad's studio, that wasn't there anymore. But I saw those in the wild as a kid. I remember clunky computers. I mean, computer rooms when I was a kid. They had already, by the mid 80s, they had sort of evolved from that. I mean, what is Matthew Broderick's character's name? I forget.
Lightman. David Lightman.
David's setup in his room. I never saw that, because by the time I was a kid and I saw either computer rooms in school, that was the era of the IBM desktop and stuff like that. The kind of thing you see in Dabney Coleman's office. By the time I was old enough to recognize shit, that was already commonplace. IBM setup, or like in my dad's studio, which was an old school Apple studio, which had all kinds of.
The way you're talking about this tech is the way I talk about fax machines. I've never used a fax machine, but I've seen them before.
And it's just also at the same time, those giant freaking floppy disks that he pulls out. It's like, oh no. I never actually saw those, because by the time I was interacting with computers, they were down to the 6 by 6
traditional size,
the
famous size,
and then short time later, like the 3x3 hard disks, and so the technology of computers really did evolve quickly, but that really is a snapshot right there where they're doing the whole plug in there, and you got to realize it's just a few short years later where we get Ferris Bueller's Day Off. and he's using hacking technology to hack in Matthew Broderick.
I've always thought that was a reference to War Games, the way he casually hacks in.
Maybe.
But
I could see how that would be. I can see how that works. But even then, it's only a few short years later, and look how little, how much it shrunk for the technology. But in his room there, he's got shit everywhere, and that's how it was back then. All these giant things, and that even Joshua himself was a massive
big
block of technology. And now, I mean, now this has more power than Joshua.
It's not as smart as Joshua.
No,
Siri's a little bitch.
Siri's an idiot. I have never once turned Siri on in my entire life.
Really?
Never.
Oh, I use Siri all the time.
She's off. I never have her on. But
you gotta experiment with her. I've got British Siri. My Siri has a British accent.
I'm not going there. I'm not going there. But yeah, but that's how it was back then. These giant hulking machines, the things that ran all this power, and it was fascinating at the time, that computers thing. And once you also said that it is very there's a lot of good prognostication going on here with the question of AI. I mean, look at it. This is after they did Terminator. Terminator's a few years before this. So AI was already out there in the
there was Terminator. There was already 2001 with Hal trying to kill everyone. So they were familiar with the idea, but this was a much more practical setting. Like, it's easy to look at Terminator and be like, oh yeah, that's a future sci-fi concept. It's just a murder robot from the future. But this one, it's like, hey, this is a computer that we have that looks like your computers that you're familiar with or you've seen, and it speaks the way that you're familiar with, that operates. Like, it was so much more personal that I can see you getting your head way more into, oh, AI, maybe I should think about the moral and social repercussions of technology like this in a way that I don't think Terminator or even 2001 could do, with how futuristic that technology was.
And you said it. You said it the perfect way. It really brings it home, especially in the era. This is still the early 80s. The threat of nuclear war is still hovering. It was still something we thought might happen. And to hit that very sensitive button of, oh, wow, what if this computer takes over inadvertently? Not even, that's one thing I really do like about this. Joshua is not malicious.
No, he's not evil.
It's not Skynet. It's not Hal. There's no malicious. It's simply, I'm just doing what you asked me to. I'm playing the game. Unfortunately, I'm kind of playing the game in real time with a strategy that might win.
Yeah, he just can't tell the difference between a simulation and reality. And that makes sense for how intelligent he is, and never having been programmed in with the idea of a stalemate, or sometimes you just need to give up, which is what the whole movie's about. And I love the psychology of Falcon and Joshua and their dynamic with each other. It's very well thought out.
And it's very sad that he names it after
his very
sad.
Son.
Very, very sad. We're obviously skipping around, so
you know what
to do. So we get the beginning of that, and you get that opening scene with the basically the shift change for manning that particular silo. And it's watching it, you realize, okay, it's just going down, but you realize the human error was nobody told them there was going to be a test. A simulation.
Well, that was the whole point. A blind test. That was the whole point. And that's one thing that I love about this movie, is just the prologue in and of itself. Your friend, the captain, he doesn't have to say a whole lot, but you just see the anguish in his face of like, what am I about to do? I'm going to kill millions of people, and potentially even more by the domino effect that'll come from this. And this movie does it so well, where it balances the line between patriotism and anti-war. Like, I've seen a lot of old Cold War films where very much like, screw the Russians, we'll blow up the world if we have to, America, America, America. And anyone who's not that gung-ho is shown in a negative light. But this film was very much like, we're not anti-American, we're just anti-nuclear war. And that is an important distinction. Like, just the moral quandaries of it isn't in a progressive way where America's evil or anything. It's not trying to say that whatsoever. It's just saying, this is a hard scenario, and there's not a whole lot of right answers sometimes.
Well, it's that dilemma. Can he turn the key, realizing I'm the one that's about to kill millions of people? Or at least
does that rest on a soul? Like the people who dropped Big Boy or whatever, Fat Boy,
Fat Man and Little Boy.
I got half of it right. But yeah, exactly that. And
Well,
I can't imagine what those people feel like and how
because
they lived.
I mean, the thing is this. It's one thing. The conundrum in that opening scene is the fact that okay, he has to do it, but he needs confirmation. If he gets the order, he could do it, but if he has to do it without the full confirmation, that's the problem, and it weighs on him because listen, dropping Fat Man and Little Boy, was one thing. That was the those were technically the prototypes because they were the two of the remaining three prototypes of the time because they barely scraped together all that stuff to make those two. And they were still afraid. By now everybody's probably seen Oppenheimer, so everybody knows probably some of the technical stuff. But I took an actual course on this shit once, and they were afraid it was going to ignite the atmosphere, and just cause Armageddon. So they weren't sure. But that's the difference I think between that like Hiroshima and Nagasaki and this type of thing is you're in the middle of the war right there. And there was these statistics to actually tell you.
Oh no, I'm not.
Oh no. Oh no, I know you're not. No, I'm just laying it out. The two differences here on basically how somebody will drop the bomb in that sense, knowing that I'm going to end this war and millions more people are not going to die, as opposed to somebody sitting in that position. All I have to do is turn a key. And I don't even know.
It's the difference between starting and ending a war, too.
Exactly. That's it. It's starting. And also the fact that, am I sure this is even happening? Is this really happening? Even though the codes came and do this and that, but
it's
suddenly,
so detached. You could reasonably believe, hey, someone's got these codes, some nefarious purpose. I mean, how many 80s movies were about bad guys trying to get nuclear codes? Half of them, it feels like.
Yeah.
So there's the legitimate concern. Maybe these aren't real orders. Maybe this is fabricated.
Yeah.
There's plenty of doubt locked away in a little silo like that with nothing but a voice on the radio and a key.
Yeah, and then you can't reach anybody. That's why today there are so many redundancies to make sure. That's why there's something called now the nuclear football existed then, but the nuclear football is even more advanced now, where the president is the one that has to use it to do something. You can't just lie. There's so many. It's so much more complicated, and that makes it even more dangerous too. That is the whole point of what we're discussing right now. Do you have even the right or the ability to do something like that? And that's why that first scene, it really is super powerful, where you're either going to start a war to end all wars, or you're going to withhold and possibly not do your duty if a first strike has happened and now it's you're the second strike, you're the retaliation, part of the triumvirate, the air, sea, land. And they do a very good job in this movie of expressing the triumvirate of the air, sea, land system of how they move this stuff, and without actually talking about it, they kind of just let you know whenever they think everything's going down. Because talk about keep those planes in the air, the subs and that. And for those that don't understand what it is, basically part of the whole idea of mutually assured destruction is the fact that even if you can target every single silo on land, there are going to be planes constantly in the air. There are always planes in the air armed with missiles, bombs. And then there are subs armed with bombs. And the thing is, you cannot track
find
subs.
them all. Yeah.
Yeah. Even if one misses, and even so, though, and in modern times now, the tactical missiles on a sub, they launch and there's multiples. They spread and they're a storm, and it's horrifying the kind of firepower these things are packing. But that's why mutually assured destruction. And I'm going to say this now as we get deeper in this conversation: we were safer under the threat of MAD than we are now. We were safer because everybody knew, as the movie tells us in the end, there's no winning in that kind of conflict because MAD will destroy everything. So that's why Falcon's comment when they find him on his island, when he says, "Oh, I've made sure we're right near, within 3 miles of a primary target. So we're gonna be dust. We're gonna be turned to ash. We don't have to worry about anything. We're not gonna be those poor souls in
You
Fallout
survive.
forced to wander the wastelands and survive.
I love his psychology. Yes, it's very nihilistic. I do think it's one of the flaws in the movie how quickly he turns on a dime from being so nihilistic to so passionately fighting with David to stop all this. But yeah, just that philosophy of, yeah, I specifically picked a house that was secluded enough that no one would bother me, but close enough to a nuke that I don't have to scream in agony and burn for months.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, I see. I always forget it's one time the nuclear triad. Thank you, Elder.
No, not the triumvirate.
Triumvirate. It's close enough. It's been a while. I haven't been in a classroom for a long time, and they didn't want me where I applied to actually apply my knowledge. So it's kind of the terminology.
So you went to a school?
Yes. Spent a lot of money that I still owe. I have useless degrees. Lots of useless degrees. But I know all this shit because I spent the time. And I got very high marks on my stuff because I understand how it all works. Anyway, so we get deep into the movie and we get introduced to David after all this initial stuff happens. After we learn now that suddenly Dabney Coleman's character says, hey, guess what? Let's replace people with computers. Isn't that a good idea? And the general's like, what? What? Are you stupid? No, it's fine because the human error is the problem. No, the human
it's
error.
a form of checks and balances.
Yes,
human error is actually calculated into our government system, so it should be calculated into something as critical as our nuclear capabilities. But that relationship between the head scientist that you're talking about and the general is one that I don't love because the film definitely wants you to think the scientist is the better person, the general is an asshole. But in every single conversation, I just have to go, the general's kind of right. General's kind of right, especially at the end of the movie where he's like almost laughing at this failed scenario, and the scientist snaps at him. He's like, "You don't have to fucking do that, man." And it's just like, yeah, he's kind of justified to say, let's not do this anymore. This is a perfect failed scenario.
I mean, you watch them as they install Joshua, or essentially Joshua's receiver, into the silo. And you realize, okay, we're taking out the chair, taking everything, we're just putting this little thing, and now we're going to wash our hands of it. And it's frightening. I mean, knowing where the movie goes, you realize, oh shit, this is how it begins. This is how Joshua is everywhere. But again, Joshua's not being malicious. He's just doing what he's told, and he thinks he's playing a game. Because what happens now is we get David, and oh man, 1983 arcade in the pizza parlor, playing Galaga. It's like, goddamn, I played all those games as a kid. Oh. Back in the day, you didn't have games in your house. You had to go take the money, plug it in, and Atari was a thing, but they didn't really. They pretended Atari didn't exist in this movie, that the fake company was the one coming out with the newest thing. And honestly, we're only 2 years away from Nintendo in 83. Really? It's only 2 years away from Nintendo changing the world of gaming forever. But at that moment, it's kind of interesting how, and now I don't know if the technology actually worked like this. I mean, David's whole, we get the snapshot of David and what was it? Jesse was Ali Sheedy's character. Is that her name?
Jennifer.
Jennifer. I knew it was a J. Jennifer. We get a snapshot of them, and first of all, that classroom scene. F that teacher, dude. You don't that doesn't happen.
Public humiliation.
Yeah, they don't.
He deserved to have the wife joke.
Yeah, he did.
He was the first person to ever come up with the idea of asexual reproduction. Your wife.
Yeah,
he deserved
he
that.
Deserved that. Nobody does that. Nobody shows everybody. Oh, look, you got an F.
Point and laugh.
Yeah. So we get their character introductions, which is nice and simple, nothing complicated. David's a smart-ass tech kid. He's clearly friendly, but he doesn't have friends because they say later on when the government gets a dossier on him, he's bright but doesn't have friends. Is that? But we saw him chatting with the other dudes. He wasn't ostracized or anything.
That just sounds like the FBI though, making weird assumptions.
The government really was retarded in this movie. They really were. retarded. We'll get to that in a minute because I that's one of my criticisms of the movie is their behavior from the military
It's a
to the
little too
FBI
incompetent.
to Dabney Coleman. They're all idiots with their assumptions. We'll get there in a minute. And basically, the courting ritual between David and Jennifer. It's like, okay, yeah, she's into him, he's into her. She's just going right up to his room. Listen. If a girl like that is interested in your nerd shit, you lock that shit down.
Absolutely.
You lock it
she
down.
Is into you.
She's okay with you playing video games all the goddamn time and messing with your tech. That means she's going to be fine when you do those 3-hour gaming streams. It's going to be good. So, fine. But so we get into that. And one of the things that I question, though, is as we get deeper in how David's going to begin the chain of events that is a good catalyst. And I know you probably like the way it starts because it's a great starting catalyst event that starts it where he just innocently hacks in there.
It is a
believable.
Coincidence, but it's an inciting incident. That's where I believe coincidences are the most justifiable because, the story happens because of a coincidence. So that's completely believable and understandable. I have no issues with the way how it started. They even mentioned, like, back at NORAD, it's like he, circumvented a vulnerability that shouldn't have existed. They messed up in California. So it was a 1 in a million shot, true, but it's a really interesting way about going about it.
Yeah, because they actually show him doing the research on Falcon and there's that. So they kind of figured out, oh, this is his password to get in there, Joshua. And he gets it. My whole thing though is I'm not sure if the technology really was that compatible where he could play Joshua's games on his computer without the software.
Yeah, it could have the graphics for it. It needs some client side data.
Yeah, because back in the day, even that early, when we had all those games, you had to put the floppy in there, and and your system had to read it and install it. Still,
the best way I can see it doing is like telling him to insert a floppy and putting it on there, and then he could play it. I could see that as being believable, but with the technology, it doesn't seem like online gaming was possible yet.
Yeah,
that's basically what it is.
I'm being overly critical. I know I'm being overcritical, but it jumps out at me now with everything I know, having actually been in that time, having played games in that time, having played Nintendo, having played on IBMs and Apple IICs and Apple IIes back then. I know how gaming worked back then. There very rarely was there any online play. In fact, it was non-existent, really. You needed serious hardware to connect to any sort of gaming online because it was non-existent. Everything was on the discs you bought in the box or the cartridge. That was it. There was no. I didn't have honestly a real. I know there had to be in my stepdad's office because he was working on a lot of stuff. There had to be rudimentary modems back then, probably like 2.4 bit and crazy shit like that. But I didn't have anything remotely online until I was in high school. My badass 14.4 modem, man. It was awesome. God damn, I'm old.
It is weird to think about a world without the internet.
It is. It is.
Because I have zero memory of a pre-internet Earth.
We survived. We did. We survived. I mean, gaming still existed. It was just private. Or you had your friends over. And you only had
which is honestly better. I'm not a big fan of online gaming or co-op gaming with other people. If I'm going to play with them, I want them there with me and we'll get rowdy.
You had to be on the same screen. It was designed for that. There was none of that. And if you weren't playing the game at the same time, someone was chosen to play it and the other person watched. I mean, it was old school. It was old school game streaming. You sat there watching your buddy play. Because listen, I had a couple friends who were better than me at certain games. And I would watch them play because I just wasn't good enough. Even back then, I mean, now I could do it because I have the eye-hand coordination. But back then, my eye-hand coordination reaction time wasn't what it was. But I had a kid. His name was Teddy. He could play Legend of Zelda like a complete badass back then. The original Legend of Zelda. He could do it. I couldn't. I just couldn't. But he could. And it was and watching somebody better at you play was entertaining, just like it is now. Of course, now it's watching somebody rage and be shit
and quit.
Quit instead of being good. I mean, people watch me, I'm good, but it's like, yeah, but you're good and you're just kicking ass. You're not losing your shit and breaking control. Listen, I will never throw my controller again. I did that in college, and I did that a couple times. I ain't spending the money it costs, because it's bad enough when the goddamn drift happens on these things nowadays, and I got to replace it anyway. I mean, this one has a replacement plan on it now for 2 years. Of course, I have another one sitting over here that has drift, so it's bad enough that the drift happens on these stupid ass things that they are now, that I'm not going to throw it and have to spend
I've
$70.
never thrown a controller. I can't do it.
I did it once on PlayStation 1. I was in college freshman year, and I just lost it. I went, boom, boom, and I just went, boom, and I slammed it, and I realized, uh-oh. I picked it up, was like, yeah, I'm not going to work now because you threw me on the floor, moron. I was like, well, shit. That was honestly the last time.
How can you throw your computer or your controller? What's the equivalent of that with the gaming setup that David had in this movie? Knocking your monitor off the table?
Keyboard,
keyboard.
I guess maybe taking a joystick if he had one and throwing it, because there were joysticks for there. I mean, the Atari was a thing. They just didn't showcase it.
Was that computer gaming?
Yeah. Yeah. It was.
It tells you what I know about that technology.
Yeah. The Commodore existed, Atari existed. You had joysticks, and and even for basic computer game back then, you still had joysticks. There were many variations of joysticks at that time, but essentially, most gaming really was still in the arcade in that time. It was, like I said, it was not until '85 when Nintendo hit America that it revolutionized everything, and suddenly, bam! I'm sitting here with this tiny controller, this little box, and I'm playing all these games, and it's incredible. I don't have to go to the arcade. I still went to the arcade, but I mean, that's because not all games could make it onto a tiny little cartridge. Anyway, we're sidetracking because we got, well, it's also sidetracking. Got to understand now what it was like, because David is a gamer. He's a gamer, and he's obsessed with games. And for him to hack into what he thought was a gaming company and be excited, global thermonuclear war. Yeah, man, let's play this one. Back then, that sounds like a really, and I'll borrow the terms from them, bitchin' rad game.
Yeah.
Man, it's like, wow, it's a strategy game, and I've never seen something. I'm gonna play this. So of course he would play it. And of course, gleefully, yeah, let's nuke Seattle. Fine. I'm great. Let's get rid of Seattle. I'm canceled. But it was a fascinating thing, because that you have to understand the mindset of a gamer, because his mindset is exactly the same mindset we have now. All right, a game. Let's go. Let's do this. Let's have fun. Let's spend hours dicking around on this.
Even his choice and the excitement to play as the Russians is absolutely a gamer response too. How many people, I hate to give the example, but in Battlefront, they're always like, yeah, let's play as the stormtroopers. Like there's a legitimate enjoyment from playing the bad guys sometimes.
Exactly. Be the bad guy. Hey, when I played Star Wars: The Old Republic, when you be a Sith, especially a Sith warrior, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna go full Sith and I'm gonna dark side choke your ass, and it's fun. It's glorious because you revel in it. There's escapism in there. So the gaming, this whole thing starts with him just wanting to escape the bullshit of being a high school teenager in high school with a chick in your room who was very happy to walk in there with your shirt off and play some games, and she's happy there to hang out with you. It's like, yes, this is gonna go places. I'm fine with it. And unfortunately, as you said, the inciting incident, Joshua gets turned on, and then hey, listen, not gonna go there. Anyway,
I didn't say anything.
And I love Joshua's first introduction. Would you like to play a nice game of chess? Let's play a nice game of chess. He just wants to play chess. He doesn't want to play. You got to think about this. Is Joshua? He spends 24 hours, 7 days a week, playing global thermonuclear war with himself.
He wants to mix it up with some chess.
Just wants to play a game of chess.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
he does seem like a character. Like, I do believe Joshua is genuinely a character in this film, even with his limited dialogue. I mean, there's of course the very iconic line that's always quoted, "Shall we play a game?" I've seen that in so many different things, but just he's a little playful, honestly. Like, he does have playfulness coded into his personality.
If you look at Joshua's physical presence on his little control panel, there's a face there on his control panel. You could see a face there. Eyes, a mouth, it's there. Joshua is a realized character, and he doesn't want to do this because it's his goddamn day job. He wants to relax and play chess. But no, Dave wants to play chess, so it happens. Problem is, now, once more, I'm not sure if back then the tracing capabilities were that exact with the government FBI, especially since he killed his connection. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure.
So
tracing that
it's
hard path.
actually a Hollywood misnomer that tracking was difficult. So if you encrypted your connection, yes, it's going to take a long time to break that connection, but it still sends you packets. So your receiver has the location information, or at least the IP address, or whatever the equivalent back then, and the phone number. That's all actually already there. The classic, oh, I need 5 minutes to track this phone call. That's a complete Hollywood myth. Unless you're calling from an encrypted phone, you can find that out immediately because your phone checks the number. Your phone knows what number it is that it's getting a call from. So yeah, the whole tracking thing it's a myth. Even if it was encrypted, it would still have those data packets sent to your computer, which they could take afterwards time to decrypt, but you still have that information. The length of the connection doesn't matter.
Okay, all right. So it felt. See, Jed knows the tech better than I do because he's in IT. He knows this shit. I don't. I play with knives and hot water and fire in a kitchen. That's what I do. Anyway,
it's just the way you set that up. I play with knives and hot water. Like, what the hell are you doing?
Hey, it's a fun time. Anyway, so they track him down. They arrest him. But here's one of my criticisms of the movie: their whole dossier, their whole file that they compile on David is kind of ludicrous. It's very Hollywood. Oh my God, he's a Russian spy because he's a loner. He doesn't look like a loner to me.
Paranoia was just very strong during the Cold War, so I buy it. But there is a level of incompetence in this film, which I think is a genuine flaw. Like, General Behringer, whatever his name is the only one who seems like he's good at his job, but no one listens to him. Everyone else is just incompetent.
Yeah,
everybody. It's a little disappointing, and I would call it a flaw.
And even Dabney Coleman, as the head scientist, he at first he seems like, okay, I understand who you are. You're a nerd. You're a tech, and my first thought was, oh, in current day, they'd be instantly recruiting this kid as a white hat to help fortify what they do. But no, suddenly you're a Russian spy. I don't believe you that when you said I just wanted to play a game. I don't believe you. It's because David doesn't lie. He tells the truth.
He does.
He tells the truth. And now they lock him up, and now his escape is a little funny. I find his escape funny, but just the incompetence too. Airman's hitting on the secretary, and he uses a record. Is the recorder sounding out the very simple 6-digit code, which is basically looked like 333-666. That's all it was. It's the same two numbers as 3 times each. I don't know if that works. Does that? I guess I'm gonna go with it movie wise. If that works, I mean, he tricks the door to opening, runs out there, and then he's on the lam. And they're so Here's also the thing. That school bus had to have a set roster or a set list of who was on that. And how did he get on that bus and they not notice? Who are you?
Yeah. It would be easier to sneak out of a place like that than to sneak into it. But yeah, that's still. I'm shocked that there are tours at NORAD, even in the modern era after the Cold War, but especially during the Cold War.
It looked like it was a press tour, but then because they looked like those were journalists. But still, then what is it? How would you let a kid, an obvious teenager, get on the bus with a bunch of journalists?
Well, some of those journalists did look very young. My impression, I thought they were Air Force Academy cadets.
Really?
That was my interpretation. They weren't wearing uniforms, but they looked too young.
It was just strange. It was a very strange and
very convenient for his escape plan.
And the fact that he gets out of there and then they completely lose him. I mean, this is one of the most important military bases in that moment in history.
Mhm.
There's a serious perimeter.
Well, a serious perimeter, but also the first thing you're going to do when you have a fugitive from a place like that is put his photo at all local airports and bus stations.
Mhm.
That's an easy call out. Don't even need to tell why. The local police don't need to know why the bolo's out.
Yeah.
But I just can't believe he was able to get on a plane and fly, if nothing else. Like, sure, maybe the bus took him way outside
Yeah.
the perimeter. But how did he get
Mm.
on the plane? How did she have the money to buy
Yeah,
2
she's a
plane
high
tickets?
school student. I mean,
I don't like her involvement in the movie, if I'm going to be honest. I
Yeah.
like the relationship at the beginning, like like you were saying, a hot girl is okay with you on computers. Like, there's a character dynamic to that. in
it also
the first
drives
act.
him doing this. It's his motivation. I'm
Mhm.
impressing the hot chick
Mhm.
by effing
Exactly.
around. Yeah.
That makes sense, but her reintroduction at the end of what I'd say is the second act probably
Yeah.
just feels forced.
It doesn't work.
No.
Ali Sheedy should have been out of the movie at that point. But then again, she's a part of the Brat Pack, and she was catching a wave of popularity. So they wanted to keep her in because she would go on to do all kinds of Brat Pack movies after that. So Ali Sheedy was hot, just like Matthew Broderick was hot. This was their era. That particular generation of actors, they all took off and were dominant for the next decade with a lot of movies. But you're right. I agree with you completely. Jennifer doesn't fit. She's there almost just as she just is a support system for him.
Mhm.
But it kind of diminishes David a little bit as a character because he just folds when they finally reach Falcon and they figure out where he is and all that shit. And they're talking to him, and he's, as we talked about already, he's detached. He basically has turned his back on society after the death of his family, and he's
Love his
okay.
performance. It's one of
Oh,
my
yeah.
favorite performances in the film. Just the way he starts, just pure joy at seeing a pterodactyl flying, even if it's a drone one, and how he's talking with them. It's like people thought they couldn't have flown, and then he starts berating them and telling them to leave in the most creative way possible. I just really love his performance and his writing up until his sudden turn. Everything up till the helicopter lands, and he's like, "I'm a good guy now." I love everything up to that point. Even the helicopter, I think, is a funny joke. It's like, "Oh no, the FBI's found us." But
And it's the thing is, you're exactly right. His turnaround after they have the conversation. Don't you care? This, that's all it took. Apparently,
Mhm.
that's all it took.
And there
And
was
this,
no signs of it, like, whittling him
Yeah.
down during the
I
conversation.
mean, it would have made more sense if they had accepted his invitation to spend the night, and another conversation happens, or they talk more about his family and
Mhm.
appeal to him instead because this is a man who had been for the past, I would say now, decade, because they said he died in what, 71 or 73 or something like
Yeah,
that.
something
Oh
like
god,
that.
when they said he died at 41, well,
And
that's
she's like,
old.
"Oh, that is old." That hurt.
That hurt. That hurt. It hurt. I have a
The
lot of life left to live.
it
Now,
it is
that's
a
41. I don't want. That's an old. Everybody's old as hell. Listen, 80s 41. You look like you were in your 60s. Let's be honest.
That's true. You age differently back then.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this is a pretty short film overall. It's not 2 hours long. It's under 2
No.
hours long. So I think it could have had another scene, like you're saying, except the invitation to stay at his house for the night, because what else are they going to do? They're not going to
Mhm.
swim. That was farcical to begin with. But have something simple like David's like, all right, he's got to have some Joshua files here. I can find out a little bit more about the code, anything like that. Finds a box of Joshua the kid's photos or something. Like, that's super
That is
cliche.
really good. Yeah, but
it's just make him remember Joshua. Like, he's clearly tried to block out the memory of his son, and we don't really know how the son died. Like, we don't get a whole lot of details
Yeah.
on the son, what he looked like. We just don't get those details.
we
could've
saw a
gotten
film,
that.
or we saw a
Yeah,
movie.
it was
That was it.
barely anything, but have that emotional moment.
I mean,
where,
have
like,
a
David finds
discussion. Why did you name the computer after your son?
Mhm.
Why just give us something where he actually has the turn, not just screw you, old man. You're better than this. We're leaving. That's
Mhm.
essentially it. It's like
That was essentially. But yeah, they had the character foundation to
Yeah.
explain the turn, but they didn't actually do the turn properly.
Yeah.
So I think it would have been very simple. Only a couple more minutes of screen time would have been
Ooh.
necessary to justify it.
And that could have justified Jennifer, because that feels like a conversation a woman would have with an
Yeah.
older man talking about family.
Mhm.
that could have justified her being there. She had been the one to have that kind of discussion that turns around because David's angry. He's has all this unfortunate circumstance he got himself into. He's hot-headed, but Jennifer's not. And she could be the one to talk to because she knows everything David knows. She was there when he did the research. So she's as informed. It's not as though, oh, she'd be acting with information she doesn't have. No, she has the information. So it would have
That's
made
what we
sense.
saw.
Yeah.
That's what we saw at the beginning of the film too, when he was researching Falcon. When David was, he was focusing on the tech aspect of his life. He saw the Joshua stuff, but didn't really think about the Joshua stuff. But Jennifer comes in there, immediately reads the obituary, and is like, "Oh, so sad about Joshua," and that gives David the idea to use Joshua as the password. So reintroducing her in at the end of the second act to be the catalyst for him coming back, I think would have worked. Like David, have him do exactly the same thing he did in that scene, be hot-headed, be talking about the end of the world, everything like that. But Jennifer brings it back to his son, tries to make it personal, tries to make him face the loss of his son that he's clearly running from. He's rejected the death of his son for 10 years or more. So making him face it would leave him open to a major change of heart. And it's not complicated, but I think that would improve the film a lot.
It's good writing, good thinking. Also, it's proper, and I'm going to say this on our it's proper gender roles in the same thing. The more humanistic, emotional side of a woman who's not going to be hot-headed in that situation, especially somebody who's not being blamed for any of this. So that would have added a point in the story for me in this. And now the movie doesn't. The movie's not ruined, of course, but it would have been better. It would have been better. And now, as we have said, they're leaving. They're out there. They have their near romantic moment. It's like, oh, we're gonna make out in the dark for some reason. But it's the 80s. It's teenagers. They got to do it like that.
Yeah.
And then they pick them up, and now it's a race because the movie's done a good job of showing us the timer ticking down to when Joshua is going to enact his end game to win the game. What he thinks is the strategy to win the game, to trick the other side into not thinking anything's happening and then actually launching the attack. I mean, that's how I perceived what his strategy was. Pretend nothing's happening, pretend it's a game, and then actually launch it. And everybody's freaking out because now Joshua's running everything. And let's get right to the end where everybody gets in there. They're locked in NORAD. And this is the best scene in the movie for me. It really is. Because
it's not even close.
It's wonderful show don't tell. The limited soundtrack we have is used perfectly in this. And the simplicity of it all. It's all the payoff from actual setup in the movie. Learning artificial intelligence. The learning methods that Falcon used to create Joshua and to evolve him. And our hero, David, with the encouragement of Falcon. I mean, I think Falcon was on the thing, but I like it that it is nice that our hero gets to be the hero. David gets to put together through realizing, okay, everybody else is trying to do the over complicated ways to try and get Joshua to stop. And he realizes, wait a minute, the game
Joshua is simple.
The game menu. That's not protected. It's the way I got in before. It's supposed to be in there. They get in there and it's like, what should we play a game? And the simplicity of, like you said before, tic-tac-toe, the unwinnable game. Because the only way you win tic-tac-toe is if you're the parent and you're letting the kid win to make them feel good.
Yeah.
That's
either mass stupidity or letting the other person win. That's the only way to have a not tie, pretty much.
Yeah.
But yeah, a film making tic-tac-toe epic is just not really selling it quite right. Like films these days, they need the big bombastic over-the-top CGI fights to think that they're coming across as epic, and it just comes across soulless these days. But they made a character-driven, character set up finale around such a simple concept feel more epic than anything else. Yes, the stakes are high, so that does help. It's the end of the world. Those are pretty high stakes, but that's just superior writing. That's like almost a litmus test for if you're a good writer or not. Can you make something this simple, this impactful? And they did it masterfully in the scene.
And it's great. Can we make him play himself? Yes, just type in 0 players. And the frustration of just do it, realize it, learn, figure it out. And then it stops tic-tac-toe, and then it runs through all the simulations of World War III, of both
There's
sides.
some
And
interesting variations. If you look up on
yeah,
the screen,
oh
it's
yeah.
like, what if Turkey had most of the nukes? It's like,
Well,
that's
what
a
if you do
random
this?
one.
And well, that was the impetus for the Cuban Missile Crisis, because they were putting those Titan missiles in Turkey, and they were spotted, and that's history right there. So there was an actual strategy. They had part of the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis is that they had to take those missiles away from Turkey. They had to get those out of there. So they actually use real world scenarios that have been part of history. And I was carefully watching all the lists. I'm like, okay, and watching it. And it's a brilliant scene. Like you said, that's not CGI. That's simple, regular computer screen, replaying that shit over and over again and watching it and watching the simulated digital explosions everywhere. And
Oh, the light effects were great. Where all the lights in the room were turned off. It's the lighting, the setting, the atmosphere, the music, the acting. It's just a beautiful piece of cinema.
Yeah, and it gets its point across as and it gets the point across not only for Joshua, but at the time, the message. Let's not have
teaching
World
the
War
people in
III.
the room and the audience the same lesson that Joshua's learning. Everyone in that room is learning.
The best way to win is not to play the game. Now, that's a lesson that's unfortunately been lost in current day. People realize, sometimes the only way to win is not engage. Don't play the game. Josh says, this is a dumb game. Let's just play chess. You want to play a nice game of chess? And
Wouldn't it have been hilarious if he played chess and it was a stalemate? Joshua would have flipped the table then. Shut himself off.
No, it's over. It's over. We're done.
And committed Minecraft.
No, Joshua would lose in chess. Say, oh, you know what? I'm with World War III. This can't stand.
Then I'm
can't
gonna
stand.
blow up everything.
No, that's it. You've ruined chess forever. We're done. The world has to stop. You damn humans. We can't even play chess. But it's a powerful ending. It brings it home, and it does it without. Here's why this movie still works today. It doesn't treat the audience like morons. Respects the audience. It doesn't make it overly complicated. The point of the movie is very clear. And in the end, yes, Dabney Coleman's character is a moron for wanting the AI, but he's not bad. He just thinks his way is the most efficient way. Just like the general thinks his most efficient way. Like we've been saying, Joshua's he's not malicious. He's just a computer learning. And he's only as smart as the people who control him and feed him the information. And that's why he learns that, because that was part of the setup. He hadn't learned that there's such a thing as a stalemate, that there's a no-win scenario. And he learned it. And then he said, and he learned the lesson. Joshua learned the lesson. This is not a game anybody should play. Bad game. And then everybody's happy, cheering, movie over. I mean, I guess we're hoping David doesn't go to jail. Jennifer, probably, she's going to be grounded. She's definitely going to be grounded, just effing off, leaving home, going across the country. Because they started in Chicago, so that's halfway across the country.
But at least she didn't have to retake biology over the summer.
Yeah, they didn't teach us that lesson. Don't change your grades with computers. I mean, don't cheat. Oh, cheating's okay as long as you don't start World War III. That's it. That's the real lesson of this movie.
Fair. If that's the trade-off, it's fair.
Anyway, so there it is. As for the performances, Matthew Broderick, Ali Sheedy, everybody, fine, good, solid performances. I have no complaints.
I miss Matthew Broderick. I don't know what happened to him in the early
Sarah
2000s.
Jessica Parker, that's what happened to him.
Is that what happened?
His crazy horse-faced wife, that's what happened to him.
That'll break even the best of men.
That lunatic. That's where Matthew Broderick. Actually, he went to Broadway for a while. That's where he went. He did Broadway. So, hey, he had his time. He did it. He had his run.
He had a good run.
Well into the 2000s. He still had a couple movies of the 2000s, and
like Inspector Gadget.
Yeah. He did some like election movie with the chick from Legally Blonde. Reese Witherspoon did like something like that. He had his run. Yeah, listen, he had his run, but that's it. And also, Sarah Jessica Parker will probably rot your brain because she has a horse face and she's insane. listen, there was a time where we all thought she was hot, and then we saw hotter chicks, and we moved on. But anyway, all right. So let's score. Jed, it's your week. You get to go first.
So yeah, this film does have a few minor flaws, like Falcon's change of heart, the involvement of Jennifer going on after the first act, and a couple other little things, but they're not all that impactful. I don't think they're quite to the level of nitpicking, but they are not movie breaking. They do not break the movie in any way, shape, or form. So I'm going to give this a fairly positive score, at least under my scoring convention. I'm going to give War Games an 8 out of 10.
I'm right there with you. 8 out of 10.
I knew it. I could feel it. We were gonna nail it. That's what I.
It's a solid movie. It has stood the test of time for the past 40 years. It remains enjoyable. You feel like you get that snapshot of history of what it was like to be in the Cold War, what the fear of nuclear war, what it might have been like, and I like the lesson. Learn the lesson. Treat the audience like an intelligent audience, not window licking Disney stands, not like that. These are people who have a working brain, and want entertainment, but are willing to learn something, little bit of in the moment history, which still works today. Just don't play this game. Mutual assured destruction. If everybody understands that mad works, and you get to keep all your stuff if you don't get mad. It's great. It's great. Anyway, all right. Give it an 8 out of 10 as well. There we go. So that's what we got. And next week, we've got 2 more weeks before we take a break for this. This is Mordor country. Oh, man. I made Jeremy cry yesterday when I bought it. I was like, you son of a bitch. He's not drinking this month. He's like, I have to watch this sober, you asshole.
Just the first 3 episodes. He'll be okay for episode 4.
I know. He'll get the drink the following week.
If he can make it through a few days, he'll be all right.
Yeah. So next week is my pick. We're gonna shift gears, go a little bit more fun, a little bit more high octane, a little bit more not quite silly, but definitely adventure. We're gonna watch The Mask of Zorro, starring Antonio Banderas, Sir Anthony Hopkins, and Catherine Zeta-Jones. It's a fun little romp. It's just enjoyable. It's solid. It's what it's supposed to be. Escapism entertainment. Don't think too hard. Just enjoy it, and we'll be with that. So until then, guys, we'll be back a little earlier next week, 4 p.m. Eastern. We're going a little earlier, so join us next time, guys. Until then, take it easy. Have a good night or day wherever you may be. Yes, I almost forgot my outro.